morning and good afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Georg Winkel. I'm head of the European Forest Institute's office in Bonn, and I will be the moderator of our event, Forests, Multifunctional Solutions for Resilient Cities. Before we start, a few words on EFI. We are an international organization. We work in research, policy support, and communication activities to basically every issue connected to forest, trees, and nature, and increasingly also relating to issues such as sustainable development, urban development, biodiversity, and bioeconomy. We are organizing this intense webinar, I have to say, a daring tour through urban issues around the globe, together with the city of Bonn and ICLEI. And I'm here in the ICLEI building. Why is it interesting to deal with urban forests and with urban nature? Just this morning, when having a very early breakfast, I have to admit, I read an article in The Guardian reporting on new research on the immense importance of nature for mental health and well-being. And this research was actually reporting about the positive effects of virtual nature. So bird voices, bird sounds, videos about nature on the mental health and well-being of the urban population. And even better, I think the article has concluded, is it, of course, if you can experience nature by yourself in more and more urbanizing societies. But the importance of urban nature and urban forest goes beyond well-being and health issues. It goes into all type of recreational effects, but also into environmental effects, biodiversity, climate change impacts on cities, but even up to the use of, for instance, non-wood forest products or wood relating to food supply in cities, but also construction when it comes to wood construction. So basically, forests have very diverse and interesting relations to cities. And this is what we would like to tackle in this event, in this webinar. We do this with a kind of daring tour, I would like to say, across the globe. We start here in Bonn with introducing the European Forest City Bonn by my colleague Gesche Schifferdecker. We will then move on and introduce the very first European-Chinese collaborative research and innovation projects on urban forests and nature-based solutions, looking into cities. We will then have an interesting tour starting in the beautiful south of Europe in Barcelona, moving on via Beijing and Vancouver, and ending up not exactly in Bonn again, but in Gelsenkirchen, with this idea of introducing different city perspectives connecting to forests. Before we start with this tour, some housekeeping rules. If you are trying to make your video working, it will not work. Because of the webinar setting, we have to mute all participants that are not speaking and disable videos. We're also disabling the chat function, but we would like you to heavily engage using the questions and answer option. So, and when doing this, we also ask you to state shortly who you are and state whom of the panelists you are addressing with your questions and answers. And we will hopefully have time in the end of the seminar to come back to questions and answers. And also our panelists have volunteered to stay a bit longer in case some questions cannot be answered in the very short time we have this morning here in Bonn. The webinar will be also recorded for your information. Well, before we start, to wake you up, be it after breakfast or after lunch, we have a small starting poll for you, and we would like to know from you, how often do you actually go to the forest? Is it more than once per year, more than once per month, more than once per week, daily, or is it actually never? And we give about, I think, 20 more seconds. Okay, I think we have already a very high percentage of people that have voted, and we have many friends of the forests here. I think in this webinar, many people that go even more than once per week to the forest, some go even daily, and another high number goes more than once per month. And there's only actually, I think, one person that never goes to the forest. And of course, we hope that this person after this webinar immediately starts packing, leaving the office or the home and starts walking to the forest then for the first time. I think we now start off with an introductory presentation by my colleague Gesche Schifferdecker, Comms Manager at the European Forest Institute in Bonn, and she will introduce Bonn as a European forest city. Gesche, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Next slide, please. And the next slide. Now you've seen the beautiful logo of European Forest Cities. Bonn is European Forest City this year, 2020. And this has been an award that European Forest Institute has granted since 2014 to the city which hosts the EFI annual conference that was planned in Bonn this year. We had to adapt it to a virtual format. However, Bonn was a really good selection because Bonn is surrounded by green spaces, and there is plenty of potential in Bonn for urban forests, for people to recreate in the forest and use the forest for their well-being. The aim of the title, and as well as hosting the annual conference, is to raise awareness for multiple values of the forest amongst the city administration, the people living in the city, policymakers, journalists, and to promote the universal importance and the social benefits of the forest to these people. And next slide, please. And in Bonn, we decided to use the opportunity of having many academic, international organizations, NGOs, forest practitioners, and also a city that is very supportive on board. And they are all interested in forests, and many organizations actually work on forest-related topics. So we decided to initiate an event series, which is called Bonner Waldgespräche, Bonn Forest Talks, to engage different audiences on forest-related topics. And the aim of the Bonn Forest Talks is to highlight the many different services, in inverted commas, that our forests provide for cities and their citizens. And the aim is also, of course, because we are an international organization, to discuss the regional forest in a global context. Well, we had many physical events planned, a variety from an event on forest and fashion organized by FSC to international conferences aiming at more scientific audience, to many guided tours through the forest and discussion rounds, etc. So we, unfortunately, due to Corona, had to adapt the series. However, we still realized a lot of things. For instance, an interview series with a local radio broadcaster. Then some events could actually take place in the forest, because in the forest it's possible to still remain the social distance. And the House of Nature was a really great partner here. And we contributed to virtual lecture series, amongst them a series on aspects of global warming. In 2 weeks, we're planning an event with Students for Future and Fridays for Future in Bonn in the forest. And we will have protesting trees there. So if you follow us on Twitter at EFI Resilience, you can learn more about what we're doing there. And if you want to know more about the Bonn Forest Talks, you can look at the link on the bottom of the slide. Next slide, please. One example I would like to introduce to you, because that is kind of something that evolved just out of the idea of the Bonn Forest Talks, something absolutely new, is an exploratory field in the forest close to Bonn, in the cotton forest. The whole project is called Wald anders denken, so think forest differently. And it's a death spruce forest site rebuilt to an explorative field There are different events taking place, from cultural events to leisure events to political events, like the Protesting Trees event is going to take place there. And it's all about raising awareness for climate change and how it's threatening our forests. You can see in the background of the photo the death spruce forest damaged by first storm and drought, and then also the bark beetle. And the idea is also to show what we can do and what we can change to raise the resilience of the forest, to enhance the resilience of our forests, and to guarantee that they provide us with all the different services that we benefit of also in the future. And it's great that some of the partners we were planning events with are now involved on this exploratory field, and this is growing as part of Bonn being European Forest City, but we're planning to continue this also in the future. Next slide, please. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to present Bonn as the great European Forest City, not only in 2020, but we'll collaborate also in the future on forest-related topics. Thanks.
Thank you, Gesche, for introducing the European Forest City Bonn and our activities with the Bonn-based partners. Before we move out of Bonn on our global journey, we have a second poll for you. We would like to know a bit more about your ideas of urban forests. And our question is, why do you think are urban forests important for cities? And here you have multiple choices. You can emphasize economic benefits, for instance, relating to wood production, increased property values on the housing market, habitats for diverse species, biodiversity aspects, recreation for citizens, human health issues, and the reduction of climate change effects, for instance, protection from heat, carbon sequestration. And we give a bit some more seconds for you to make your choice. And already now, what I can see here, we have nearly 90%. There's a clear vote for that we choose the right title with the multifunctional solutions for resilient cities, because you highlighted very much, actually with 94% human health issues, which has of course increased, especially now with the pandemic times in several cities, but also reduction of climate change effects with 89%, recreation for citizens with 83%, as well as habitats for diverse species with 83%. And clearly the economic benefits of forest wood production, increased property values, they scored much lower with about 29%. With that, I think we have nicely set the stage for my colleague Rick de Vreese. Rick is a senior expert at EFI and researcher for urban forestry. He's currently based and more or less locked down, I'm afraid, already in Ghent in Belgium. And he will present the Clearinghouse project, which is a collaborative project between European and Chinese partners. And he will give us an idea about what we are doing in this project that is now entering in its second of 4 years. Rick, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Best wishes from Ghent, indeed. Well, I would like to introduce you to the Clearinghouse project, the first Sino-European research project on urban forests and urban trees. Can I have the next slide, please? So in the next slide, or this slide and the next one, we see a bit of the multiple ecosystem services where Gesche already has been referring to, that urban forest and urban trees provide to us. Historically, urban trees were more seen from a aesthetic perspective and a recreational perspective, but we now know that urban forests and urban trees have much more services they provide to people living in cities. So we termed this a bit as a new role for urban trees, enhancing the ecosystem services they provide, but also meeting new societal demands, like we have seen during the COVID lockdown in most European and global countries. In the next slide, we introduce a bit the concept of urban forests as nature-based solutions. So as we have seen, urban forests provide lots of benefits, lots of services to the society. But how can we really use these benefits? How can we multiply the advantages of urban forest and trees for society? So therefore, we're building on the concept of nature-based solutions, which are solutions that are inspired and supported by nature, which are cost-effective and simultaneously providing environmental, social, and economic benefits to help building resilience. Well, urban forests and urban trees are very cost-effective solutions, and they're very traditional solutions. And because they are so traditional, because we are so used to urban forests and trees in our cities, they are sometimes a bit overlooked. When you look into the literature on nature-based solutions, you sometimes see quite technological things like green walls, and so on, or green roofs, which are a bit complicated sometimes to implement, but trees are sometimes more easy and more cost effective to implement. You talk about urban forests and urban trees, but it's a very broad term, which includes not only the forests and the trees in the cities, but also surrounding the cities, the small woods in urban areas, and even trees in backyard or front gardens in the public domain. In the next slide, we are looking into, well, we are introducing the project and the partnership. The project is working together, or in the project, we are working together with 26 partners from 11 countries, including 10 cities and urban regions in Europe and China. I will introduce the cities later. Our nice colleagues at the Chinese Academy of Forestry, the Research Institute for Forestry, led by Professor Wang and Dr. Jiao Jin, are coordinating the project from the Chinese side, and we at European Forest Institute are coordinating the project from the European side. In the next slide, we are listing the main objectives of the project. I'm going quickly to run through them because this will give you a bit of flavor what will be the outcome of the project. Actually, we're working on typology on how urban forests are used and managed as nature-based solutions. And very shortly, we'll be launching a European and Chinese-wide survey on societal perceptions and demands towards urban forests as nature-based solutions. And this will be really a milestone in the project and also in the research, because there's been a lot of research done, a lot of local surveys or national surveys have been done, but this will be the first European and Chinese survey on how the public perceives urban forests and trees throughout Europe and China. We will be looking into the policy frameworks in Europe and China, and we will compare the 10 case studies. Very interesting. There will be also an element of citizen science, and I would also like to already announce the education package, which is now in its completion phase. Which is very nice, a very nice project to introduce the ecosystem services provided by urban forest and urban trees to pupils between 10 and 14 years old. And finally, we will be developing some additional tools like guidelines for practitioners and so on. Next slide, please. So the 10 cities we are working on, 5 cities in China, being Beijing, Huabei, Hangzhou, Xiamen, and the Hong Kong, Guangzhou, Shenzhen urban region. In Europe, we are working with Barcelona, where we have Eugenia as one of the driving forces. She will introduce the case in Barcelona later on. We have the case of the Sonian Forest, or the Sonian City in Brussels. We have the case of Gelsenkirchen in the German Ruhr area, which will be introduced by Norman later on. We have the twin city of Leipzig-Halle, and we have the Polish city of Krakow. And every city has its own characteristics, of course, and has its own challenges where urban forests and urban trees can play a role to cope with these challenges. And the final slide, in the final slide, we will be, yes, next slide, please. You can see the multiple channels we use to inform you. So please follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, or one of the Chinese social medias like Weibo. Or you can register for our newsletter through our website, which is clearinghouseproject.eu. It's a very short flavor I've been giving you, but as Georg said, we are only in the second year or just entering the second year of the project. So register on one of the media here, listed here, and you will be updated. And you will see that we will be very active in the coming months and years. I'm looking forward to host you in one of our upcoming events. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rick. And before we continue, just to remind you, please use the questions and answer function if you have questions or comments, for instance, relating to this project, and we will either take them up in the end of this webinar or follow up with you afterwards if you put your name there for us contacting and coming back to you. Well, Rick said that there are very different perspectives on urban forest around the globe, and now we will continue with our journey and move to Barcelona. We will have now Eugenia Vidal Casanovas representing the Area Metropolitana de Barcelona. I hope this is somehow the right way of pronouncing it. We have pre-recorded Julia's talk, but Julia is live with us and is willing and looking forward to answering any questions or comments she will receive. Sorry, Eugenia. Sorry, Julia is here sitting next to me. Eugenia, the floor is yours.
Hello from the Barcelona Metropolitan Area headquarters, and thank you Effie and thank you ICLEI and the City of Bonn for this opportunity to reflect on the importance of our forest. The Barcelona Metropolitan Area still maintains a high rate of open spaces, most of which are protected. These spaces coincide with important geographical landmarks to which the urban settlement has been adapting gradually. For example, in relation to forest, the orography play a very important role and made it possible to preserve spaces of high ecosystem service value, such the cultural range that is a natural park. Besides these forest areas, AMB has as well other green spaces of great environmental and economic wealth, such as the Llobregat and Besòs river basins, streams and beaches. And besides these spaces as well, we have other green spaces with more urban nature, namely streets, squares and parks, and a myriad or a constellation of fragments and interstitial spaces. This whole set of heterogeneous spaces made up an interconnected network that we call it green infrastructure, that provides us with a wide range of social, economic and cultural service. Our vision is to reinforce the interconnection of our green infrastructure, permeating the urban fabric and ensuring biodiversity and the functioning of ecological functions. Therefore, two very important aspects of our vision is the valorization of ecosystem services and the concept of green infrastructure. In relation to services, if we look at our forests, we can see that they provide us with a wide range, but we would like to stress two contributions. One is their contribution in relation to the preservation of biodiversity, and the second is their importance in terms of cultural services. Cultural services, especially recreation, accounts for one of the most valued services by our citizens. And this is a fact that the actual COVID-19 pandemic is making even more evident. Besides this actual change, there has been other paradigm shifts, for example, in recent decades, with the perception of these spaces as spaces for exercising, for practicing cycling and running. This demands specific regulation, especially in spaces of high ecological value, and to avoid conflict between users, especially now with the need for social distancing. In relation to biodiversity, we would like to stress the role they play as refuge for many species. In this sense, they are essential habitats. Thank you very much.
And that was Eugenia Vidal Casanovas from the Barcelona metropolitan region. And if you want to address her, use the questions and answer mode. We are jumping a big way into a later time of the day. I'm happy to introduce now Professor Cheng Wang, one of our main collaborators, or our main collaborator from China in the Clearinghouse project from the Chinese Academy of Forestry. And he will give us some insights into the amazing developments relating to urban forest in China, in the country actually of megacities, one of the countries of megacities on our planet. Professor Wang, the floor is you. And again, we have been pre-recording the video, but as you can see, Professor Wang is there and is looking forward to responding to comments and questions.
The notable challenges for urban forestry in our region is how to manage the new urban afforestation properly, which is different from the management rules of natural forest. Millions of trees are planted in urban area. It requires us to update the method of urban forest management to improve the urban forest ecosystem health and services. The notable opportunities that urban forestry can deliver in our region is to build a city-crossed urban forest network, which contains forest corridors, forest and wetland patches, urban and peri-urban parks, and wildlife habitats. At present in China, more than 300 cities are implementing the Forest City program, but they are doing this separate by administrative boundary. So developing the region urban forest network according to city cluster scale is one of the most important things we should consider. Urban forest is different from natural forest. The constraints in our region are our lack of the techniques of urban forest management and the evaluation tools of urban forest ecosystem service. European Forest Institute Urban Forestry Facility based in Italy will help to enhance the urban forestry network between China and Europe, as we also collaborate with the urban and peri-urban group at FAO, which also located in Italy. This will improve the future cooperation on urban forestry between Asia and Europe.
Much, Professor Wang, for introducing the impressive Chinese forestry city network with more than 300 cities participating. Again, use the question and answer function if you have comments or questions for Professor Wang. So now we jump across the Pacific Ocean and move into Canada. And I'm happy that Professor Cecil Konendijk is presenting again a pre-recorded presentation on Canadian urban forests, focusing on Vancouver. Cecil is or has been a professor at the University of British Columbia. He still is associated with the university, but he has recently moved to Europe and is working now in different fields on different issues, but with his core interests as a globally leading, I think you can say, expert on urban forest and nature issues.
Hi everybody, my name is Cecil Konendijk and I send you many greetings here from, actually not from Canada, but from Barcelona, Spain, where I recently moved. But I've been asked to say a little bit about daring Canadian cities and how urban forestry is playing in there. And as we all know, of course, Canada is mostly known as this big country with a lot of beautiful wilderness, wonderful animals, etc. But it's easy to forget that Canada is also a very urbanized country. So most of the Canadians, about 83% or so, live in cities like Toronto, Vancouver, Halifax, Montreal. So there's no doubt, of course, that urban trees and urban forests play an important role in Canada. And increasingly, these are also being recognized as key elements of sustainable urban development. So interesting enough, urban forestry as a term was actually coined, invented, one can say, in Toronto in Canada by Professor Eric Jurgensen back in 1965. But since then, Canada has had a little bit of a hate-love relationship with urban forestry. While its southern neighbor, the United States, really took on the term and the concept, Canada has been a little bit lukewarm. So we don't have any national policy really, or any national strategy for urban forestry, apart from an initiative taken by Tree Canada and some other NGOs a few years ago. Actually, finally, we have an urban forestry strategy. There's some involvement from the Canadian Forest Service and other actors, but really at the national level and even at the provincial level in Canada, there's very little involvement. So urban forestry, like in many other places, is mostly done by cities that are more or less daring. And of course, most Canadian cities are kind of medium-sized, maybe in the interior of the provinces. But we tend to focus on these big cities that are very well known, places like Vancouver, like Toronto, like Montreal, I already mentioned. And some of these cities actually have pretty advanced urban forestry strategies and implementation plans. So my knowledge is mostly of course, the city of Vancouver, where I lived the last 4 years. And Vancouver has a very ambitious target to be the world's greenest city. And that includes, of course, also to have very well-established urban forests. So the city is planting 150,000 new trees, which sounds maybe like a lot, but actually the current canopy cover in Vancouver is less than 20%. It's actually around 17, 18%. And that is for a city that is actually based in a temperate rainforest. It's maybe not very high. Also, maybe there are some issues in terms of bringing all the stakeholders together. So the Vancouver Park Board is a very big player, obviously, but there are a lot of smaller interest groups that are interested, maybe not always so well coordinating in making their urban forestry efforts. So there, I think a city like Toronto has been a little bit more successful. There have been a bit more powerful non-governmental groups driving urban forestry forward. So what are the hot topics in Canadian urban forestry? Well, I think they're very similar to many other places across the world. So we're thinking about things like climate change, of course, public health, and the current COVID pandemic is also a very important one. And here we've seen a really different approach in how cities allowed people to still use green spaces during the pandemic, where Toronto, for example, is much more restrictive. People were not really allowed to go into the parks during the lockdown. While in Vancouver, we were still able to go to the parks and the beaches while respecting, of course, physical distancing. And that really helped, I think, make people appreciate the local nature, even their local streetscapes as new green spaces. And I'm also sure that has had very good contributions to our physical health and well-being. So, of course, urban forestry in Canada is now booming or blooming, one can say, not in the least because of the efforts of universities like the University of British Columbia, where I've been teaching during the past years, and where we have a very vibrant urban forestry undergraduate program with hundreds of students enrolled, not only Canadian students, but students from all over the world. So we're very excited that as a newest initiative, we're launching a Master of Urban Forestry Leadership in summer 2021. And because of the pandemic, we decided to have at least the first year of this course online. So if you're interested in becoming a leader, a green leader, helping the world's cities to become more daring, more green, more vibrant, and more resilient, don't hesitate to reach out. So I thank you for listening, and I wish you a really good seminar.
Thank you very much, Cecil. We are now moving back to Central Europe, finally. I'm happy to introduce Norman Ruth-Galvis from the city of Gelsenkirchen, again a clearinghouse partner. And he will be introducing Gelsenkirchen's approach to education for sustainable development and the role of urban green space in this concept. Norman, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning from Gelsenkirchen, about 100 kilometers away from Bonn. It's located in the west of Germany. You can see it here on the slide, in the middle of the so-called Ruhr area. So it's an old coal mining and industrial area within Germany. We speak of the metropolitan area, Ruhr area, with over 5 million people. And Gelsenkirchen is in the midst of this area with 265,000 inhabitants. And over 30% of them have an immigration background. It depends on the industrial legacy of the area and also the structural change still going on. But still, this area is very green, and we have forests here, and they have the impact of restoring those old mining sites, and also regeneration and social cultural integration. Next slide, please. So this is the Ruhr area, and it's also the Emscher Landscape Park, as we call it. So this is around the open sewage canal, which was a river before and is now restored as a river. And around this landscape park was developed in over 100 years. It's the biggest landscape park in the world, actually. And again, Gelsenkirchen is in the midst of it. Next slide, please. One of the main focus of Gelsenkirchen is the education and learning focus, and we are a learning city and also part of the global network of learning cities from the UNESCO. So we see all those places we have here as a potential for learning and education, and also the old mining sites, as I will come back to in a minute. And the questions are, for example, how can parks and urban forests become places of social balance, and also how can we have cost-effective maintenance of urban forests and parks. Next slide, please. And now I want to show you the two examples which we have in the Clearinghouse project. It's for one, the Forest Laboratory Industrial Forest in the Ruhr area, which is an old coal mining site, which was demolished over 80 years ago. And now we have a really interesting forest there, which grow on its own. And the idea is to get people and pupils into the park and into the forest to learn and to have a learning place and education place. So it's a holistic approach between nature and people. And the last slide, please. The other one is the Green Laboratory Biomass Park Hugo, also an old coal mining area. And this is interesting. This was the last one in Gelsenkirchen operating, closing down in the year 2000. And in the last years, we developed together with the people at the place, this forbidden area into a place where people can also appropriate this place. There's a community garden, there's nature coming back, and it's a really interesting way to learn how to appropriate a former area which was, so to speak, forbidden. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Norman, for introducing the Gelsenkirchen urban forest. Now it's time to move towards the question and answers. And I would like to incentivize you to use this function in case you have questions. At the moment, we have just one question. Giles, oh, this is another difficult name for me, Sayuin from Future Earth, co-lead research and innovation. He thanks for the thought-provoking presentations. And other than the development of case studies and guidelines for practitioners, he's asking how much disciplinary research on this is still needed based on the needs of policymakers. And in addition, he's also asking how much synthesis research on the topic is needed and how do research and experts get involved. I think he's not pointing out whom to address. I would guess that probably Cecil, Professor Wang, Rick might be experts that are attracted by this question. Who wants to go first? And of course, everyone else also. I mean, I've just made this pre-selection.
Maybe Rick?
Yes, thank you, sir. Maybe I will reply the question from the perspective of Clearinghouse. Of course, there is already a lot of research being done. One of the aims of Clearinghouse is to bring together this research to do a kind of meta-analysis and see which are the missing pieces. And one of the missing pieces, I think, is to have a real good insight in what citizens think on the forest and urban trees. I think one of the main issues which is still linked to implementing agroforestry trees in cities and urban regions is, on the one hand, the controversies which are there. I think people in cities all know that they receive, on the one hand, a lot of complaints when leaves are falling, like in this season, or trees blocking solar panels and so on. But on the other hand, there's also a lot of complaints when trees are being cut for whatever reason. So there is a difficult balance there. And we have to, well, when we want to increase the tree cover in cities, this should be in line with what citizens think and citizens need. So therefore we have the big survey. On the other hand, well, part of the question is also how do researchers and experts get involved? Well, we have a workshop in every case study city, or a series of workshops to really include the opinion of researchers and experts, but also citizens in the cities. Yeah, we will also have some events with other stakeholders, more global stakeholders later on. Of course, all a bit impacted by COVID. And maybe Cecil, you can answer the question on: is there still need for more research on this field?
Yes, thanks. Yes, I would say, of course, but I have a vested interest being still part-time researcher. But I think the main point that Gilles actually raises here in terms of still being more interdisciplinary and even transdisciplinary, working together with stakeholders, I think this is really important, and this is also increasingly the case. So we see, I think, an influx of other types of disciplines into this whole field of urban greening, urban forestry, nature-based solutions. So I think this actually creates a really nice platform for novel research, where we look at things a little bit differently. We see, for example, engineers, public health professionals, planners, ecologists getting more and more involved. And I think this is a really good trend that we should capitalize on. I know that Clearinghouse is also involving people from a wide range of disciplines. So yes, I think more research, more interdisciplinary work as we move along for these daring cities.
Thank you very much.
I would like to add, from a local government perspective, we need more research as well.
And then I still give the floor to Professor Wang. Eugenia.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Let's go ahead.
No. I just wanted to add that it's not only researchers that want more research. From our local government perspective, we need more research as well, especially in relation to the cost and effectiveness of a nature-based solution, in order to be able to apply them more easily, because it's not easy to convince politicians and society in general. And then we need more research on specific issues, such as the monitoring of these solutions. And I'm sorry for having interrupted the conversation.
I think this was perfectly fine, because I excluded you from those that can. Professor Wang, do you want to add from a Chinese perspective?
Yeah. In China, the urban forest, including the wetland together, including wetland. So they say the urban forest is a very good way to solve the problem caused by urbanization. So in China, urban forest construction in urban area sometimes change the forest distribution patterns in China. So increase the forest resources in urban area. So in the future, I think the urban forest can give a very important roles in balance the negative effect of urbanization.
Thank you very much. Now people have really woken up in the questions and answers. I guess we will have difficulties with tackling all questions. So we start with the ones that got some hands up things, thumb up things. And there's an interesting question. Can you share example, success and challenges on citizen science initiative? And if possible, what might have made them a success or not? I think in Clearinghouse, we are not yet there. The citizen science thing is only starting later, but perhaps one of you is already now qualified to respond to that question.
I would say Rick has most experience maybe in that area.
Do you agree, Rick?
Well, not from a research perspective, but of course, I've been working with citizens and with NGOs before. Yeah, I mean, the range of citizen science is very broad, and also the range of tools included. Well, one of the critical points to make it effective, as I assume, is that it should, on the one hand, really trickle people to do things. So we are thinking to develop, or we will develop a tool or an app in clearinghouse, and one thing we were thinking to include is that you just can indicate that you have this tree in your garden that is maybe this high, and then people just will see, well, the tree is delivering this amount of oxygen, it's lowering the temperature in the house with that amount of degrees, and so on. Very simple, but very concrete. As I noticed, Norman is popping up, and he also has, in Gelsenkirchen, I think we also have quite some experience with citizen science, but also citizen involvement in the cities, like this new watering initiative. Norman, maybe you can explain this a bit.
Norman?
Yeah, I will try. We are still at the beginning of this process, but within the process of Learning City, we are trying to bring together citizen science on an AI level. So the people and the researchers are trying to work together on eye level, not so much like the researchers try to have this relationship as they say what they want from the people, like counting butterflies, for example, but they try to come to joint projects on research and joint questions of research, and also joint projects. And this is a process we will develop within the next years, and we call it Citizen Science 2.0. So I can really say how it's working, but we are now in the laboratory situation to try out if it's working and what we can do to make it work better.
Thank you very much, Norman. And this sounds really interesting. Perhaps we need another webinar in 1 year to report on your experiences with this approach. With regard to time, I would just like to take 2 more questions, and one I will respond very shortly on. But the first one is, how do you plan? So it's from Atsubike Michael Nwanchukwu. I hope this is correctly pronounced. It's very far away from a guy of my age to read the names. So how do you plan to nurture, relocate, and reserve the animals that are living in the forest within the abandoned mining site? I think, Norman, this goes to you. What are the animals?
Yeah, once again, I can speak for the example of the biomass park Hugo, which I talked about briefly. It's about making the animals that were there. For example, the cross-toad was implemented into the construction site of this former coal mining site to become this green area. So the construction people had a system in which the toad was relocated within the areas already converted, so that there was no harm to the cross-toad, and it's still on the site. On the other hand, the recreation of this area has led to the process that the animals and the flowers and the trees are coming back for themselves. So we don't have to do anything. The nature is coming back, and this is really a wonderful recreation of this of those mining sites, which were really abandoned and dirty and everything. So we don't have to nurture them very much. We have something like insect hotel, as we call it, so that there's the probability that more insects are coming back. but mostly the animals are coming back by themselves.
Okay, thank you very much. I take a last question, but I reformulated. Corinna Basnou, she has been asking about what we think about the measures of prohibition of the access to public urban green, including forests, and relating to the COVID restrictions. I would like to reformulate this question. I would like to ask all your panelists as a closing statements of one sentence only to say what long-term effects of the COVID pandemic do you see on urban forests? And you can, of course, refer to different measures that were taken in different regions, restricting or facilitating access to urban forests during the COVID time. So what is your one sentence? What long-term impact of the COVID pandemic do you see on the city forest, urban forest relation? Barcelona people, do you want to start? If you have prepared at least for a different question, I think, Virginia.
Okay, what I see is what I mentioned in the video that we recorded. That is a bigger appreciation of urban forest and a bigger need for this kind of spaces. So I think that this is something positive, and I think we should work on this direction, facilitating, but at the same time, as I mentioned in the video as well, trying to avoid the negative impacts on the forest and to avoid conflicts between users as well.
Thank you, Virginia. Cecil, referring to Vancouver or Barcelona?
Maybe I take a global perspective. So my vision for daring urban forest of the future is that these are fully integrated into the development and planning of cities. They provide a base for all things we do, developing our cities. And they also provide a network of health promoting resources from people's doorstep all the way to peri-urban woodlands.
Thank you. And I guess the COVID pandemic might facilitate this process. Professor Wang, Norman, Rick, who wants to go next? What is your observation on the impact, long-term impact of the COVID pandemic on urban forest and city forest relation?
Yeah, well, in China, we in recent years we do some research work on the relationship between the biodiversity and the different type of forest, including the natural forest and some forest park in city area. But in recent years we focus on the tree species, how to select the suitable tree species for biodiversity in the city area.
Okay, thank you for emphasizing biodiversity.
We want to learn about the natural forest, near natural forest management in European area and the other area, because in China in recent years there are so many plantations in and around the city.
Thank you for emphasizing this other opportunity to learn from each other across the continents. Rick and Norman, do you want to add to this?
Yes, I think what we have seen at least in the countries where people were still allowed to go out of their houses, that the parks and were really overcrowded, especially with people with more vulnerable living conditions or in more vulnerable quarters. And this really, I think we have been stressing this line for 20 years or longer in urban forestry, the need for more urban nature in general, accessible green space and so on. And let's hope that the COVID has, unfortunately, but the COVID has visualized this very, very truly with very overcrowded parks. And let's hope that city planners and politicians have seen this and take this message in the long term as a source, as a ground to deliver more accessible urban green space in our city. It's really an interesting point, or it's really urban green space, accessible urban green space should be part of the critical city infrastructure and the health infrastructure in city.
Thank you. Norman, do you want to add still?
Yeah, just short. I think what Rick said also applies to Gelsenkirchen or the Ruhr area, this highly dense and highly urbanized area. We need those green areas, and we need more of them. And so I hope that the higher demand in the COVID situation will probably lead to a new value of green space and forests, and that this value will be taken into account into planning in the future.
Thank you very much. I would like to encourage the panelists to respond still to questions that are in the chat, where we haven't had the time to raise them now in the webinar. And while you do this, I would really like to thank all of you panelists. You've done an excellent job, also in terms of timekeeping, which allowed us with a small extension of the time budget to have an interesting discussion, also following all the interesting inputs around the globe. I would also like to really thank ICLEI for facilitating this event in a very professional way, the city of Bonn, specifically Susanne Norden, who has played an instrumental role also in setting this up, and of course my colleagues Gesche and Maria from EFICOMS for supporting the event. Finally, I really would like to thank the participants. I saw the number here and you stayed until the very end, most of you. I hope you found it interesting. As always in these short webinars, it's more like giving some ideas. It's not solving all the issues, but please feel encouraged to contact the panelists or contact us in case you're interested in further follow-up with panelists or with Effie and the co-organizers here, ICLEI or the city of Bonn. Well, yeah, thank you for joining this sixth, and I understood, I'm looking here at my supporter in the room, last event of the Bonn Global Series during Daring Cities 2020 virtual forum hosted by EFI in the European Forest City, Bonn. And we look forward to seeing the series continued in the future, and perhaps we can, from the Clearinghouse project, then report some new exciting research findings and also innovation findings in cities around the globe. Thank you very much.